What if I told you that the very foundation of WWE Monday Night Raw just cracked in front of our eyes? That the heartbeat of the Red brand, its champion, its workhorse, its visionary, may have just taken his final steps down the ramp, and no one saw it coming. This isn't a rumor. This isn't part of a scripted heel turn or a work to hype the WrestleMania card. No. This time, it's different. This time, it's terrifyingly real. Seth Rollins is hurt. And not just the kind of hurt that gets whispered about backstage and brushed off with a promo the following week. This is real-world, hospital-grade, ligament-snapping injury. A knee, once reconstructed, once feared to be a career-ender, is again the center of every wrestling fan's panic. But what makes this moment so jarring is the silence. The kind of silence that lingers after the camera's cut, after the pyro dies out, and after Paul Heyman steps into the center of the ring to deliver news nobody wanted to hear. Monday Night Raw was supposed to be a reset. The WWE Universe was ready to pivot from chaos to clarity. The World Heavyweight Champion was set to lead the charge into WrestleMania season. Fans speculated everything from a blockbuster title feud to the return of the Shield. But instead, we got a stretcher, a dropped microphone, and a man, Paul Heyman, suddenly breaking the fourth wall, staring into the hard cam with hollow eyes. "It's not part of the show anymore," he muttered. And with those words, everything changed. Let's back up. Just 24 hours before this Raw segment aired, social media exploded with questions. Footage from a live event showed Seth Rollins awkwardly landing on his left leg after a suicide dive. At first, it looked like a slip, a simple mishap in a high-risk match. But as fan-shot videos began circulating, something was off. Rollins didn't pop up with his usual energy. He didn't crawl toward the ropes or bang the mat like he's done so many times before. He just stayed there. Motionless. Clutching his knee. Face pale. Eyes blank. The referee leaned in. Medical staff jogged toward the ring. The crowd went from electric to dead silent in seconds. And yet, WWE said nothing. No tweet. No injury report. No backstage footage posted to Instagram. For a full day, the company maintained an eerie silence, as if hoping it would all fade away. But when Raw aired live the next night, something felt off from the start. The pacing of the show was strange. The crowd wasn't as rowdy. The commentators avoided even mentioning Rollins until well into the second hour. And then, the lights dimmed. That's when Paul Heyman walked out. Now, to those who have followed Heyman's career, you know this isn't a man who deals in subtlety. He thrives on chaos. He spins words like weapons. But not this time. No smirk. No catchphrase. No tribal allegiance. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hold your breath. He stepped into the ring. Looked directly into the camera. And began to speak, not as the wise man of the bloodline, not as the executive director of WWE, but as a man who just got off the phone with a doctor who had the worst possible news. Seth Rollins is hurt. And not the kind of hurt you walk off. Not the kind of pain that gets numbed with cortisone shots or masked by adrenaline. No. This, Heyman paused, visibly struggling, this is the kind of injury that changes lives. The arena, filled with over 15,000 fans just seconds before, went deathly quiet. You could hear someone in the front row gasp. You could hear someone else whisper, "No way." And then Heyman dropped the bombshell, the knee injury was real. A full medical team had confirmed structural damage. Ligaments. Possibly a fracture. Surgery wasn't just on the table, it was likely imminent. And with WrestleMania less than 3 months away, the headline match, the entire main event scene, and the very soul of Raw now hung in limbo. This isn't just about one man. This is about legacy. It's about what happens when the very thing you built your body around begins to collapse beneath you. Seth Rollins isn't just another WWE superstar. He is the show. The man who rebuilt his image time and time again, from the Shield to the Architect, from the Kingslayer to the Visionary. He's held every title. Headlined every show. Survived injury, betrayal, fatherhood, and creative limbo. And still, every Monday night, he showed up. Dressed in something outrageous, mic in hand, smile on his face, ready to fight. And now? He might not walk into WrestleMania at all. WWE fans are used to the pain. It's part of the business. Injuries happen. But this one cuts deeper, not just because of who Seth is, but because of when it happened. Right before WrestleMania. Right at the peak of his popularity. Right when the storylines were converging into something epic. For months, he's carried the World Heavyweight Championship with pride, calling it the workhorse belt. He defended it constantly. Weekly, if needed. Against Finn Balor, Shinsuke Nakamura, Drew McIntyre, even Big Bronson Reed. He made it mean something again. And now, the belt may be without its champion. Raw may be without its anchor. So how did we get here? Sources backstage tell us that Rollins had been battling through lingering pain for weeks. He wasn't letting on to fans, but those closest to him noticed. A slight limp here. An extra wrap under the knee pad there. He was hiding it, because that's what champions do. He knew how close WrestleMania was. He knew the stakes. And like always, he refused to show weakness. Until his body finally made the decision for him. What comes next? That's the million-dollar question. Will Seth Rollins undergo surgery? Will WWE strip him of the title? Will Paul Heyman step in to orchestrate a new plan in his absence? The truth is, no one knows. Not even Triple H, who reportedly called an emergency meeting with creative just hours after Raw went off the air. But here's what we do know, this isn't over. And if you know Seth Rollins, even a little bit, you know that if there's a 0.001% chance he can recover in time for WrestleMania, he'll take it. He'll fight. He'll risk everything. Because that's who he is. Still, the reality is harsh. We've seen careers end this way. We've seen legends carried out before their time. And while we all hope this isn't the case, we must face the possibility that this Raw segment might have been the beginning of a long, painful goodbye. So, before we dive deeper into the night of the injury, before we break down Paul Heyman's cryptic words and dissect the medical reports, take a moment. Remember who Seth Rollins is. Remember what he gave you, week in, week out. Every splash. Every promo. Every title match where he left his heart on the mat. Because if this is the end, he deserves more than a tweet. He deserves a tribute. He deserves a legacy. And if it's not the end, then brace yourself. Because a wounded architect is the most dangerous kind. It started with a routine dive. One of the thousands Seth Rollins has executed throughout his storied WWE career. A move so embedded in his DNA that most fans barely register it anymore, suicide dive through the ropes, followed by a crash landing onto a stunned opponent outside the ring. A staple of modern wrestling, fast, flashy, exhilarating. But on that fateful night, something went horribly wrong. And this time, there was no recovery. No selling. No storyline out. This was different. The night was supposed to be a celebration. Seth Rollins was booked in the main event of a televised WWE RAW, defending the World Heavyweight Championship against an up-and-coming threat, someone handpicked by Triple H to push the champ to his physical and emotional limits. Some fans had guessed it would be Braun Breaker, others predicted it might be Drew McIntyre seeking redemption. But the truth is, no one was paying too close attention to the who. Everyone was watching him, Seth Rollins, the champion, the performer, the war-tested survivor who never let a big match fall short. And to his credit, the match started brilliantly. Rollins was in peak form. He strutted down the ramp in a bold black and gold ensemble, flanked by pyro and an eruption of crowd energy that only a few can command. The commentary team played up his recent title defenses and hinted that WrestleMania plans were beginning to take shape. The arena was alive. The fans were invested. The match was stiff, fast-paced, and electric. Until the 4th minute. That's when Seth flew. He bounced off the far ropes, built momentum, and launched himself through the middle ropes with the precision of a human missile. But when he landed, something looked off. Instead of crumpling gracefully against his opponent and rising for the next beat, he collapsed. Not the kind of collapse that's built into choreography. Not the kind of delayed cell that precedes a reversal. This was uncontrolled. Sudden. Alarming. Live broadcast cameras cut back to the ring. A quick shot of the referee talking into his earpiece. A confused opponent glancing to the side. Then, back to Rollins, still down. Still clutching his leg. The commentary team suddenly fell into a stunned hush. Corey Graves broke the silence. Folks, we're trying to figure out exactly what just happened. Rollins may have tweaked his leg there. Tweaked was an understatement. Fans in the front row were already standing up, whispering. Some had their phones out, not to film the next spot, but to document something real. A few caught what WWE didn't want to show, Seth grabbing just below his kneecap, digging his fingers in, wincing not like an actor, but like a man in real, agonizing pain. It took just 30 seconds for the ring doctor to appear on the outside. 30 seconds that changed everything. Seth tried to stand, but he couldn't. His leg buckled. That's when the camera cut away entirely. In its place? A spontaneous cut to backstage, an awkwardly timed promo package with Rhea Ripley and Dominic Mysterio. A hard left turn in the pacing. The kind of cut that producers make when something serious is unfolding and they don't want to risk live fallout. By the time the show returned, Rollins was seated on the steps at ringside, his head down, his mouth open in a pained grimace. The referee signaled an X, the universal wrestling sign that something is not part of the script. The crowd knew it. So did everyone watching at home. That's when something bizarre happened. Rollins waved off the doctor. With a visible grunt and a burst of what could only be described as adrenaline-fueled fury, he pushed himself to his feet. Limping. Hobbling. Grabbing the ropes for support. He rolled back into the ring. A hush fell over the building, not awe, but concern. He was clearly not okay. But in true Rollins fashion, he wanted to finish. Not because he had to. But because he felt he owed it to the fans, to the company, and to himself. The match wrapped quickly, within 2 minutes. The finish was rushed. A modified version of his finishing move was delivered, stiff and awkward. His opponent laid down for the pin, clearly in on the change. The crowd clapped, but it was subdued. The kind of applause reserved for someone surviving, not winning. Then it happened, the cameras lingered just a little longer than they normally would. The music faded a bit too early. The lights didn't immediately cut. And Seth Rollins, with sweat dripping down his face, leaned into the corner, lifting his leg slightly, then dropping it again in visible agony. Backstage crew members arrived. A hushed flurry of action began ringside. Fans noticed one of the producers grabbing a headset and sprinting toward Gorilla. Michael Cole offered a strange line, "Folks, Seth Rollins may be in more pain than we thought. We'll keep you updated. No jokes. No storyline pivot. Just worry." And when the show went off the air, social media lit up. Clips surfaced from fans sitting in the first few rows. They captured angles the broadcast missed, Rollins being helped up by 2 trainers, limping down the ramp with his arm draped over the shoulders of a referee and a WWE medic. One fan's video, zoomed in from the floor, showed Rollins saying to the medic, "It popped. I felt it pop." Another caught the exact moment he landed outside. You can hear it, a faint crack, barely audible under the crowd's roar, but haunting once you notice it. Within an hour, #Seth Rollins was trending worldwide. No official word from WWE. No tweet. No statement. Just silence. Until Paul Heyman opened the next RAW. Now let's talk about that silence. Because sometimes what's not said says more than anything else. WWE is no stranger to injury angles. They've used real injuries in kayfabe for decades. But when something is truly real, when it crosses that line, they pull back. And that's exactly what they did here. Backstage sources began leaking details to dirt sheets like Fightful and PW Insider. One anonymous trainer claimed, "We knew right away. It was bad. He couldn't put any pressure on it. He was pale. Like, really pale." Another report said Seth was rushed for imaging later that night at a private facility, not a public hospital, another sign WWE was trying to control the optics. Then came the rumors: torn ACL, damaged meniscus, possible tibial plateau fracture. None confirmed. All plausible. But every one of them shared one truth: Rollins would be out for months. If true, that means he'd miss WrestleMania. Potentially even the following SummerSlam. A nightmare for a man who has carried the Raw brand on his back while Reigns, Lesnar, and other big names drift in and out. And yet, despite it all, Seth never tweeted. Never went live. Never spoke a word. Which is why Paul Heyman's words hit like a truck the following week. To understand the gravity of what happened on Raw, we have to rewind the clock. Because Seth Rollins' story doesn't begin with a suicide dive gone wrong. It doesn't start with him clutching his knee on live television. No. This chapter started weeks, maybe even months, before the world noticed. It began in hushed trainer rooms, in faint limps backstage, in brief glances exchanged between medical staff and producers. It began with silence. A silence that now feels deafening. Rollins had been showing signs. Subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye. But to those who study wrestling like a science, to those who watch every stride, every bounce off the ropes, something had changed. Let's go back to early December 2024. At a live event in San Antonio, Seth Rollins faced Damian Priest in what was billed as a preview of a potential WrestleMania feud. The match was solid, hard-hitting, well-paced. But something stood out to fans in the front rows. Seth favored his left leg. Not dramatically, not limping. But his footing on the turnbuckles was more cautious. His landing off a Falcon Arrow was less explosive. His final stomp looked just a little safer than usual. Was it ring rust? Fatigue? Or something more? 2 weeks later, at the WWE Holiday Tour in Chicago, fans noted Rollins wearing an unusual brace under his gear. Again, no public mention, no commentary highlight. But in leaked backstage photos, the outline of a support sleeve was visible beneath his tights. Just a precaution? Maybe. But to those who remember his devastating 2015 ACL/MCL/meniscus tear, this was familiar. Too familiar. Fast forward to early January 2025. Rollins had just defended his title in a high-profile match against Gunther. The match was heralded as one of the best televised Raw bouts of the past year. But after the match, as the cameras cut and the WWE Network faded to black, fans noticed Seth slumped in the corner, not in celebration, but in discomfort. He spoke to a ringside medic briefly, motioning toward his knee. Still, the show went on. No one sounded the alarm. And perhaps that's because Seth Rollins is exactly who WWE says he is, a workhorse. He shows up. He fights through pain. He doesn't complain. If anything, it's part of his mythos. A man who walks through fire, draped in outrageous jackets and gold, hiding pain behind bravado and laughter. But even the strongest engines have limits. And on January 29, during a closed-door WWE medical evaluation ahead of the Elimination Chamber build-up, internal reports flagged Rollins for significant joint instability. The memo never reached the public. But insiders say the discussion was tense. Rollins was advised to rest, at least for 2 weeks. Maybe 3. His response, allegedly? I'll rest after WrestleMania. That quote, now making the rounds on every wrestling news site, reads like a prophecy. And a tragic one at that. You see, this wasn't just about a title reign. This wasn't about ego. Seth Rollins was planning his WrestleMania masterpiece. Sources close to WWE creative say he was already workshopping a story arc so personal, so emotionally loaded, it would have paid tribute to everything, from the Shield's legacy, to his time as the architect, to his vision for Raw's future. WrestleMania 41 was supposed to be his. His chance to prove that his title, the World Heavyweight Championship, was not the B-belt but the soul of WWE. But as the weeks went on, more signs emerged. At a Raw event in Dallas, Rollins uncharacteristically slipped during his entrance. He brushed it off, playing into it like a showman. But those who rewatched the clip frame by frame noticed how he staggered slightly. His left leg failing to catch his full weight. Again, WWE didn't mention it. They didn't want panic. They didn't want doubt. But behind the scenes, conversations had shifted. Producers began altering Rollins' match plans, shortening bouts, reducing high spots, removing dives. Commentary teams were instructed to avoid talking about his knee at all. Even Becky Lynch, who was never far from Seth at events, seemed more guarded, more private. And still, Seth refused to stop. Then came the match that broke it all. The January 22nd episode of Raw. The night everything crumbled. What most fans didn't know is that Rollins had visited the WWE Performance Center just 3 days before that match. Trainers observed instability in his landing mechanics. One performance coach noted a clear lateral lag in his left knee extension, meaning it was no longer generating the explosive force needed to protect itself during high-impact landings. They advised him not to wrestle. And yet, Rollins insisted. Because this match, this specific Raw, was going to set up the storyline for WrestleMania. He needed the momentum. He needed to finish the night standing tall. And that's when he dove. That's when he landed wrong. When he clutched his leg. When the cameras cut. When the referee flashed the X. When the crowd stopped chanting. When everything changed. Suddenly, the whispers that had circulated backstage for weeks became screams. And the rumors? They caught fire. Within hours, Dave Meltzer reported on Wrestling Observer Radio that Rollins' knee appeared to buckle in a way consistent with a ligament tear. PW Insider received word from a source inside WWE that this wasn't planned. Everyone's freaking out. Even Ryan Satin, often measured in tone, tweeted, "Prayers up for Seth." Hoping this isn't déjà vu. Fans began connecting the dots. The brace. The limp. The shorter matches. The change in tone from commentary. The backstage tension. It all made sense now. The rumors had never been just rumors. They were the truth peeking through cracks in the performance. Cracks that, now, had split wide open. And yet, no official confirmation. WWE maintained radio silence. Not a tweet. Not a press release. Not even a vague medical UPDA.